Why am I here? And I had this experience, this very bright light just seemed to surround me and encompass the entire room so much that I couldn't even see anything. In that moment, I felt so much intensity in my body. It felt like my body was burning from the inside out. And I thought, this is it. I am going to be gone. This is it. Maybe I'm dying. Maybe I'm not meant to be here. And I was shown that it was like a picture of the world showed up, and there was a hand pointing to it. And I was shown that I chose to come here for the sake of helping others and actually to help raise the consciousness of humanity.
Hi, I'm Lisa Wetsel, and I channel information from the Akashic Records. And I'm going to have a little discussion with my friend Teresa Bobo. And Teresa is a psychiatrist. And the reason why have asked her to be on the show is because as we're going through this huge energetic shift and what's happening, between the 3D and the fifth dimension energy, we are all going through a lot of chaos within our own systems, within our minds and our emotions, and a lot of stuff is coming up. Our old trauma and different things are coming up naturally. And a lot of times when this old stuff comes up, we really don't know how to deal with it or what to do with it once it's being brought to our attention. And so the reason why I asked Teresa to help us out here is because she has some really good tools and understanding about transforming negative beliefs, feelings, and behaviors so that we can move forward on our spiritual path. So, Teresa, thank you for being here.
Thanks for inviting me.
So, can you give us a little bit of background? Tell us a little bit about your history and what you do?
Yeah, I'm a clinical psychologist, and I primarily do therapy. Um, I really started out working more in primary care, and that wasn't very satisfying to me because in primary care the sessions are quite a bit shorter, and there's a lot of medication that's prescribed, and it just didn't really feel like a good fit for me. So I ended up leaving that position, and I started doing more traditional therapy, and I found that I loved it so much. And so now, primarily, what I do is provide private therapy for people, and I do accept all kinds of different insurances. So, but mostly how I end up working with people is by word of mouth. Somebody who's worked with me ends up referring a friend or a family member, and so primarily what I do is I see people for therapy and mostly via telehealth.
Good. So just a little tidbit. It doesn't matter where anybody is in the country; they can contact you anywhere. Yeah,
Yes, yes.
and which is the great thing about technology these days. So how did you come into this work, where you've decided to help people transform?
Well, gosh, I sort of kind of went through my own suffering, if you want to call it that. And I had a marriage, a 10-year-long marriage end, and was, I realized I needed to start looking at myself and figure out why I kept ending up in relationships that didn't work out. So I ended up in this spiritual journey, and I had a colleague of mine actually refer me to Rupert Spira. I don't know if you've heard of him or not, but he's one of the most requested spiritual teachers in the world right now. And I had read a lot of Dr. Hawkins' material, transcending levels of consciousness, and I sort of had this sudden awakening after listening to Rupert Spira, and I just suddenly realized I am not my thoughts. And so that kind of started me on this journey that I'm in now. And um, uh, so that's kind of how I ended up here, really falling more into the spiritual, getting more involved and finding more interest in spiritual matters, because I had to kind of go through that track myself.
So on your journey, and the experiences that you had, because your story is very similar to a lot of us, probably the majority of us, have gone through relationship breakups and different things. And then beginning to find that, wait a minute, who am I? What I've always been under somebody else's idea of who I am or who I'm supposed to be, but who am I? And so as you went through this journey, how did you start feeling that there's something that I really need to look at? I mean, like, what was it, more or less your own identity? And then once you tried to figure out what it was that you're recognizing that you need to learn more about yourself, how did it take you down that spiritual road, and how did it help you spiritually?
Yeah, so that's a great question because um, I had heard um, Dr. Hawkins talked a lot in his work about enlightenment, and I was reading about like what is enlightenment? What is that? And in the psychology literature, that's often referred to as well as self-realization. And so it's always been spoken about in such a vague way that I was so interested in understanding what is that like to just transcend yourself, you know? And how wouldn't that be amazing if you could start to see all of your own habits and patterns and the things that led you to these places to begin with, and that you could sort of transcend beyond that and see it in a different way? And I really wanted to know what that was. And so I had been meditating for months, for sometimes an hour or two a day. And in those meditations, I would just let go of whatever would come up for me: past relationships, worries about my kids, um, parting with food that I really loved and was afraid I might lose if I didn't like know myself again anymore. If I were to let go of myself, there was a lot of fear that came up that I worked through letting go of. And but it didn't quite take me there to understanding what that was until I watched one of Rupert Spiro's videos, and it was just something that he said, um, and he was asking a question about what is it like when you meditate, and of course the answer was it's peaceful, it's silent, there seems to be nothing else there. And he asked, do you know of it? And yes. And so that peaceful, loving, infinite space like presence that you experience when you meditate, he said, that is you. And in an instant, I remembered all of my meditation experiences of being in this silent, open, peaceful, space like infinite presence. And I knew instantly that is me. That is my experience when I meditate. Thoughts, they appear and they disappear within me. Sounds, they appear and they disappear within me. Sensations, even, they appear and they disappear within me. But the one thing that never goes anywhere, or the one aspect of my experience that always remains, is myself.
Mhm.
And then it was just like all I could do was kind of laugh that all of this time, how I really had confused myself with thinking I was a separate entity and overlooking really just the nature of being.
And because that is such an important point. So, what is your definition of the nature of being?
The nature of being. I would say it's being present and aware.
Mhm. Yeah. So, when did you begin to awaken to the purpose and the abilities that you have?
It was, gosh, it was a little bit before that time, actually. That was sometime in 2020, 2021 that I had this sudden realization, but there were things that happened leading up to that point, and I say that maybe it's more of a progressive realization. But I had an experience, again, it revolved around relationships, and it was after I had gotten divorced and I felt a very deep connection to somebody I was in a relationship with, and that individual told me that they basically weren't interested in me like that. And I was just devastated. And I went into my room, and I'm not home, I was somewhere else. And I kind of just cried a little bit. I asked myself this question: what is the point of me being here if I can't seem to find a relationship or somebody that is my person? Like, why am I here? And it was at night, it was in the dark, and I didn't have the lights on in this room, but I had my flashlight on my phone shining, and I had this experience where it was very intense experience where this very bright light just seemed to surround me and encompass the entire room so much that I couldn't even see anything. And in that moment, I felt so much intensity in my body. It felt like my body was burning from the inside out. And and I thought, this is it. I am going to be gone. This is it. Maybe I'm dying. Maybe I'm not meant to be here. And I was shown that um, it was like a picture of the world showed up, and there was a hand pointing to it. And I was shown that I chose to come here for the sake of helping others and actually to help raise the consciousness of humanity. And I thought, well, isn't that egotistical?
Yeah.
But that's what I was shown. And again, it felt at the same time so peaceful and loving, but it felt like my body was on fire. But that's when I really discovered that's why I'm here, is to help spread and share love, really.
Yeah. Well, there's a couple of things that you mentioned. And first of all, I want to talk about relationships really, 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 really quickly, just a short thing, because, we're so conditioned to believe that, our lives are revolved around relationships. And
Yeah.
that's a conditioning. And
Yes.
I'm glad you agree.
Yeah.
you know,
Yes.
because it's exactly like what you said, when you feel like the only purpose you have is for somebody else, then it's easy to get so absorbed in that belief system that you have to have somebody to fulfill your purpose, that you have to be in a relationship in order to be whole or be complete. And where we are in this particular time is unraveling that belief system specifically. And what you recognized was that, what am I here for?
Right.
What is my purpose? And as we go down this journey and we begin to recognize that our life is not based on somebody else, that it's really about me and my soul, the soul that resides within this human construct, and that this is
Yeah.
the purpose that I'm here for. And the understanding that you're here to help humanity, and
Mm.
being able to recognize that this is huge. It is huge,
Yes.
but it's far from egotistical. And
Yeah.
and the thing that I think I really want people to hear is that there everybody on this earth is to help. The reason why everybody's on earth at this particular time is to help one another grow and love and find the truth of who I am, who you are,
Yeah.
who we all are as individuals, and then follow our path to help change consciousness. That's how we're all here
Yes.
at this time.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I also want to say, to that egotistical comment, if anybody is ever asking, you know, is this an egoic thing? Is this egotistical? Just the fact that you're even asking the question says no, because you're actually considering how what I'm thinking about is really going to impact myself and other people, and being conscientious about wanting to do what's right and wanting to do what's in the highest good is not egotistical
No.
in and of
Yeah,
itself.
it's living
So,
from the heart. It's living from
exactly.
that space that's within us, that's showing and
Yeah.
helping us to feel and connect. And
Hmm.
yeah, so that's a good point. Glad you brought that up. So what are some negative beliefs that, mostly it's like, what are the typical negative beliefs that we hold about ourselves?
Oh gosh, there's so many. But they all revolve around not being good enough in some form or fashion. I would say the most common revolve around being worthy in some way, not being worthy, being unlovable, and being helpless. So most of our beliefs seem to stem from these core beliefs.
Yeah.
So there could be 100 thoughts that revolve around not being good enough in some way, not being smart enough, not being pretty enough. That's when I experienced myself too.
Yeah. Me too.
Uh, I think probably most women have probably had some thoughts like that at some point.
Absolutely. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
So where do you think that these belief systems stem from? Like where did they originate?
Well, that's a good question. Um, I think many of them are conditioned, meaning it is what was said to you at some point. It is what a friend might have said to you. It is what a parent or somebody who was really important to you might have said to you or called you. Um, it might also be, I would say though that the primary thing is um, the separation, the seeming separation of myself.
Yeah.
So believing that I am a temporary, limited being named Teresa, who's going to end when this body dies someday, is probably the primary reason.
Yeah, yeah, that's a very good point. Yeah, it's so interesting how we are so affected by the conditioning as children, and how a little kid on the playground could have said something to you that, when you're 8 years old, it just cuts to the core, and you live your life holding on to those words and may not even be aware of it. But again, I think it's important for, you had mentioned how intertwined, how these belief systems are so intertwined with our everyday life, and how they're so expansive, and feeling small is that's the way that I do it. And as I do my sessions, I talk to so many different people that have these belief systems of feeling small, feeling restricted, not being able to really stand in the truth of who they are and love life and enjoy life and live life to the fullest and be vibrant and lively, because of this old condition that kind of holds them down and holds them confined. And
Yeah.
and the choices and the decisions that we make every single day have a tendency to tie back into those old belief systems. What we wear, and where we go
Exactly.
shopping. Well, this doesn't look good on me, or somebody might not approve of this, so I can't buy that. Even though I love it, I'm not going to buy it because my husband might not like it.
Right.
Something, that can be so basic that we may not even realize how all of this is intertwined in everyday choices and decisions that we make, that we're so
Yeah, and I
unconscious to.
and I just worked with someone before meeting with you now, who is so worried about disappointing her parents. So all the choices that she's making right now are revolving around disappointing her parents.
Yeah,
And that's a lot.
it is.
But it's also enlightening to discover that that is what's behind some of the choices that are being made,
Mhm.
that there's a fear there.
Yeah. So give us some examples of the choices that she would make because of trying to please her parents. Because again, this is a common thing that we go through.
Oh gosh, some of the choices would be, not taking actions in deciding whether or not she wanted to go to school or return to school. Some of the actions might be ending a relationship if it didn't seem to be consistent with what the parents wanted.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
Those are big ones.
And then there's a story that gets made up in the
Yeah.
process to explain to other people why one is making these decisions, because I can't really tell you the truth that I don't have my parents' support.
Yeah. And that goes down a whole nother road.
Right.
Yeah, and so when we start finding ourselves falling into these traps, in which I think that we're basically we fall into them to be to be approved of and to please people from children. As a children, the first thing is pleasing our parents, because they set the rules and we have to abide by them. So then, therefore, we become conditioned to follow their path. What they're laying out for us. So, how do you think that this affects us spiritually and our spiritual growth?
Well, if we begin making up stories about ourselves and who we are, it is a way that we try to control the world around us and what happens. It's a way that we sort of give ourselves control in ways that we don't seem like maybe that we have it. But when we start making up these stories about ourselves and who we are, um, that takes us down some paths that I think will ultimately lead you to understanding who you are at some point. It just might take a little bit longer for you to get there.
Mm.
So as far as affecting our spiritual development, it's like that you're seeing this illusion about who you think you are, and then you show up in the world expecting things to happen based on who you think that you are, and then everything just continues to happen because there's a way that you show up or people show up in relationships thinking that they're weird or thinking that they'll never be able to make friends or fear of being rejected that has people showing up in the relationship in a particular way that has it be the self-fulfilling prophecy.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, and I've actually fallen into that trap. Having the idea that this relationship isn't going to work, going into because I'm not good enough and they're not going to like me, the way I am, and so it's just going to be a matter of time. So this relationship's going to end. It's almost like self sabotage.
Yeah, it is.
Yeah, and
Yeah.
and again that feeling that you're seeing yourself as an illusion, like what you said, it's not really getting down to the core of who we are. And then once we can really get down, I always think that it's living that life of an illusion, it's eventually going to break us.
Right.
It's eventually going to break us down to the point that we're just not happy, we can't do this anymore, something has to shift and change. Is that what you find?
Right. And yeah, and that's a great place to be in too.
Yeah, 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 being broken, to finally recognizing it's the craziest thing how this works. It really is, and the universe is so funny because that's what they're doing to us right now. It's
Yeah.
like we're gonna break you, get you down on your hands and knees and say, "I can't do this anymore. I can't think this way. I can't live this way. I can't be this way because I'm miserable. This isn't fulfilling
Exactly.
me." And so
Right.
then when you get to that point, then it's finally like, okay, I'm going to have to do something. I have to make some changes because I can't keep I can't keep doing what
Yeah.
I'm doing.
So the suffering is a good thing, but the problem with it is that people try to avoid the suffering.
Yeah, because it's uncomfortable. It's not fun.
Yes,
Yeah. So then we just stuff it down and deny it.
exactly.
To like,
And then it's going to come out sideways at some point in some other interaction or relationship with someone, and you're going to wonder why it's there.
yeah, absolutely. Yeah. So we've kind of led into this, but how can we identify the negative feelings or behaviors that become obstacles for our spiritual growth?
So anytime that you're feeling a negative emotion, I'll start with emotions because they seem to be the most intense for people. They seem to be what we all avoid or what people avoid. Is when we're experiencing an intense emotion, what I always tell people is to admit that you're experiencing it and even talk out loud. I talk out loud to myself. I teach people to talk out loud. No, you're not crazy. But to say something like, I'm aware that my mind is creating the story, and in that story, I'm angry. Whatever you're creating the story about, and um, and that I'm angry. And can I just allow myself to accept and experience right now feeling angry? Can I just let myself experience that? Because usually, if we just let ourselves experience it and we sit with it and we admit that we're experiencing it, whether it's fear, anger, anxiety, whatever it is, doesn't matter. Usually, within about 90 seconds or so, that feeling starts to dissipate. So, what I tell people to do is just acknowledge that they're experiencing the emotion. And if they have a hard time with thoughts and they begin thinking about all these thoughts and catastrophizing and, oh no, if I do this, then that will happen and all that. No, if that's something that you find your mind doing, refocus on I tell people to close their eyes and actually just sense and tune into, where am I feeling this fear, anger, sadness, whatever it is? Where am I feeling it in my body? Can I just focus on that? Maybe it's my heart beating really fast. Maybe it feels like it's going to beat out of my chest. Can I just let myself focus on my heart beating really fast and be with it, face it, shine the light on it, love it, let it be there? And then as you begin to focus on your heart racing or beating out of your chest and you start to slow your breath down a little bit, you notice, oh, it's not beating so fast anymore. And oh, gosh, it seems like it's back to a normal rhythm. And then poof, it's not there anymore.
Mhm.
So you can't any longer say that you're sad or you're frustrated or you're angry. If you sit in the emotion and you let yourself experience it to its conclusion.
Yeah. Yeah.
What keeps it going is thinking about it.
Yeah. Yeah. You just said a word that I want people to hear: sitting in it, sitting in the emotion. And it's something that a lot of us spiritual people that are going through this process, we talk about sitting in the emotion, and a lot of people don't understand what that means. And so I just want to make sure you just described it. It's sitting it and allowing it yourself to feel it, and let it pass through and work through you. And again, we're so conditioned, in my generation, we're supposed to hold in your emotions. We're taught to suppress, if especially, if you're not, if it's not good, if it's anger, you definitely
Right.
suck it up, and
Yep.
you don't express anything. And so we are conditioned to just kind of hold on to it without really recognizing what it's doing to us internally, and how it's creating our belief systems and our thought patterns.
Yeah.
Yeah. So another thing that you talked about are stories. Let's talk
Yes.
about, okay, so when we were talking about the stories that our mind tells us,
Mhm.
build on that a little bit.
Oh, so in order to try to understand why things are happening in the world or around us the way that they are, well, we have a built-in meaning-making machine that likes to add meaning to everything that is happening. And in that doing that, it creates a story. So, like for example, I got in trouble when I was little, I remember, and my mom was really mad at me, and I wanted to go give her a hug just to know that we were still okay. And she's like, "I'm so angry at you. I don't even want to touch you right now." And I was so hurt by that. And so I went to my room and I cried and I made up a story. My mom doesn't love me. She doesn't really love me, or she would have just hugged me and told me, "I'm okay. We're okay."
Mhm. That's-
So,
yeah. How long did you hold on
when,
to that story?
oh, I held on to that story for about 38 years.
Yeah. Yeah. And you see how damaging that was.
Yeah, because then now I'm looking for the being unlovable
Yeah.
showing up in all my relationships. And so, even so much that my mind might create it to be there when it's not really there.
Right.
Just because somebody doesn't respond to a text message in 24 hours doesn't mean that they don't care about me.
Yeah. 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 But it's easy to get, again, something like that, then our mind starts spinning out into all these different other stories. Why isn't this person responding to me? And all of that crazy chaos that we create within our own minds.
Yeah.
So, is there anything else that you can share with us about negative feelings, or give us more examples of what negative feelings could be, so that we can have a little broader range of examples?
Like, as in sensations in the body, or
Just thought patterns of
thought
negative.
patterns. They're mostly fear based. So it sounds like this: if this dot, 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 then dot, dot, dot. So if you catch your mind creating a story about if this, then that type scenario, there's almost always you're creating a rule about something that you have a belief around.
Mhm.
And you could even ask yourself, so whenever you're experiencing a negative thought, for example, or if you're feeling very intense negative emotions, I might just start with the emotions and focus on them, like we talked about, not on the emotion, but on where you're feeling it in your body. But if you want to play with thoughts a little bit, you could ask yourself, what what negative beliefs am I buying into about myself in this situation?
Mm.
And ask yourself that question out loud and see what the first response is, because there's almost always an automatic first response that comes.
Mhm.
Um, Another really great technique would be to say, so what, to yourself.
Mhm. Mhm.
And I'll give you a good example how I used it myself. But I was really upset when I found out that my ex-husband had gotten promoted. And I had I was very angry about it. And my daughter said, Mom, you seem to be really upset about this. And I said, you're right. I'm going to excuse myself and I'll come back when I'm complete. And so I left and I went into my bedroom and I said, so what that he got promoted? My first automatic thought was, I should have said something.
Mhm.
Well, so what that I didn't say something? Well, you're responsible for what's happening right now. And so what that I am responsible and I didn't say anything.
Mhm.
And then it just really took me back to, it was like an aha moment of, oh, I I make some choices and I choose my behaviors or my actions based on what is in the highest good for everybody, or I should say maybe what is in the service of my higher self. And so then I just had to remind myself how interesting it is that I made a very particular choice around this issue and I chose it knowingly. But it still pops up a couple years later when this individual gets promoted and it's still there, funny enough. But so asking yourself the so what technique and just keep saying so what to the next thought and so what to the next thought and so what to the next thought will keep pulling for the thoughts that are behind or underneath the one that you just exposed.
Mhm. Yeah. So when we talk about the negative belief systems that we have and the way that we look at ourselves, and again, you had mentioned fear and feeling small are, I think, probably the two most common things. I think we all have these issues. And again, fear is so expansive. So it goes into so many different directions. Fear of failure, fear of being alone, fear of not being good enough, fear of eating the wrong food. Fear of all of these different things. Fear is so expansive. So when we start to really recognize that, oh, I'm making a choice and decision because I'm just using this as an example. I'm fearful of failing at creating an art project that's good enough for people to like. So because I'm afraid of not being successful in what I could create and it wouldn't be well received, I'm just going to pull away from it and just not do it at all. So therefore I'm basically kind of depriving myself of being able to grow and expand and find out who I can really be without feeling the need or my opinion of being judged. And so when we start finding ourselves getting into these negative behaviors, negative talk, and we are starting to react to those things, can you give us some ideas and practices, techniques and practices that we can use to help process through that? And of course, we talked about sitting in it and we talked about so what. But is there anything like journaling and meditation or anything that somebody can do that can help as well as those two things that we just talked about?
Yeah. So besides the so what, just asking yourself the question, what negative beliefs am I buying into about myself in relationship to whatever is happening right now? What are some of those beliefs that I'm buying into? So just even asking yourself that question. But I like to also talk about cognitive diffusion techniques. And so cognitive diffusion would be like, can I put these thoughts in my hand and just watch them and look at them from a distance? So cognitive diffusion is, can I separate who I am from my thoughts? Can I put them outside of myself so I can look at them and see that who I am doesn't depend on them?
Mm.
And then even asking myself the question, who is it that is aware of those thoughts? So if I'm aware of those thoughts, then I can't be them. I'm aware of them,
Mm-hmm.
which means then I have control over them, which means I can actually choose then what I really want to think about.
Mm-hmm.
So you could put your thoughts on clouds, or like, can I just hold this thought in my hand and look at it? Um, can I file this thought away and save it for later if you're in a place where you're not going to be able to do that right now? Can I click the X button of the box that surrounds this thought and have it just go poof and disappear? Can I use a silly voice to say that out loud to myself?
Yes.
Can I name the story that these thoughts are about?
Yeah.
Oh, here's the story. Being unlovable is showing up again. Isn't that interesting?
Mm-hmm.
So, naming the story of these thoughts and what they're related to, what belief they're related to.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, that's a great one because, it's kind of out of the norm. And that's kind of where I get so stuck because it's kind of like, okay, well, how do we resolve this? And this always seems to be like the same stuff: journaling, meditation, mindfulness. And it's let's get out of the box. let's expand on the things that we already know, because there's so many different techniques out there that are being used that we may not have ever heard of. And that's really why I wanted to have people like you on the show, so that we can broaden the perspective for people that, well, maybe I can't meditate and it's not working for me. It's not taking me to this place of actually addressing what my issue is. So, are there any other techniques or things that you can share?
Yeah. I like using the zooming out metaphor. So, if you've ever used binoculars and you've ever tried to zoom in to see something and then you zoom in too close and you zoom in so close that you can't see what the thing is that you're looking at,
Yeah,
that's what is happening when we've jumped into the story of whatever it is that we're creating. Is we're in the story, we're too close to it. And so if we know that that's happening in our experience, just saying something to yourself like, I'm aware I'm jumping on the moving train here, but I can zoom out and step away from it and get the bigger picture view of the whole thing. And so you could literally visualize yourself adjusting, holding the binoculars and adjusting the little knob on the top and zooming out, and you get the whole picture. And then you can see what you're looking at in the context of everything else that's happening around it.
yeah, yeah. I think that's an important one because we do have a tendency to just see right here, right in front of us, and not being able to see all of the intertwining in the bigger picture. And I kind of learned that lesson a long time ago. I had an experience. I turned into an eagle. And
Yes.
yeah, and the message was see with the eyes of the eagle. And I wasn't just standing in front of the tree, I was flying over the forest. You know?
That's so interesting that you say that because that's another metaphor that I use a lot when I work with people is, if the eagle's down in the tree line, it can't really see through. There's so much there. It's so dense and it's so thick that in order to get a different view of it, you'd have to fly up above the forest, and then you can get the bigger picture and see maybe a pathway out.
Yeah, yeah. Or even just understand the situation a little bit better. Again, opening up our perspectives. Yeah, yeah, awesome.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I also tell people that if you could even just imagine to, slide right out of your body as if you're looking at yourself and the interaction from a different viewpoint,
Hmm.
could you see it differently if as if it wasn't happening to you?
Yeah, yeah. And that's so significant because in the work that I do, I always I've recognized a long time ago that I use the Akashic records more as is a spiritual tool in order to help us to grow in working through these situations, to where, if you're dealing with something, that repeated pattern, whatever it is, failed relationships or whatever it may be, low self-worth, that, and being able to go back to a time where it all began. But the thing about it is that I've always heard is that by being able to see it from the spiritual perspective changes that angle of what we're looking at when we're just seeing it from our mind, or from what that human construct is that's created the story about what's happening. And it's so important to be able to see it from a bigger, broader angle than just that narrow, small view.
Right.
Yeah.
And that's why there's so much out there right now about mindfulness and meditation, is because what you're learning to do in mindfulness or meditation is, no, I'm not going to go in and feel complete peace. And, you know, that's not what it's for. It's for, can I learn how to just observe my experience without reacting to it and judging it? Can I just get curious about finding it interesting that this is what my mind is creating and how it just does that all by itself? And I can observe it and I can see it. And then I can choose whether or not I want to choose it.
Mhm. You are making me so happy right now. I'm so glad you said that, because I don't think that people really truly understand the whole concept of meditation.
They don't.
Yeah.
I
And
have no idea.
yeah, yeah. So do you want so we're on this
Yeah.
topic. Do you want to dig in a little bit deeper into it?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. So again, I have so many people that I always ask them if they've tried mindfulness or meditation, and I often get, yeah, but it doesn't work for me, and I just can't relax when I'm doing it, and I say, good, that's the point. And they say, huh? But yeah, so the whole idea for mindfulness and meditation is, you're not going in to find peace and relaxation and all of that. It is, I tell people, it's like you're going to the movie theater. Can I bring my popcorn and my soda and sit here and watch the show on the big screen? And the show is called The Nature of My Automatic Mind.
Oh,
And can I just sit here and observe it without latching onto it or feeling like I have to get up and do something because I'm having those thoughts? Can I just observe them and let them pass and then refocus in whatever I'm focusing on? So you can focus on what it just feels like to breathe, the sensation of it. I tell people a really great technique that I love using is, can I just focus in the space behind my eyes and just stay in that space and watch a thought appear in the space and then disappear
mhm,
and then refocus in the space?
mhm,
So the whole purpose of mindfulness and meditation is, well, mindfulness is a little bit different, but mindfulness is giving you cueing. And every once in a while, there's a little voice that comes on and says, notice that if you get distracted, you can choose to return at any time. And so in that moment, you hear it, you look in your own experience, and you realize, "Oh, I was thinking about the grocery store list and I didn't even realize I was there. Isn't that crazy, right?
mhm,
Okay, now that I realize that I'm thinking about the grocery store list, I can choose to return to just focusing in the space behind my eyes or whatever." So the idea is, you catch yourself in thinking, and then you bring yourself back, and then you catch yourself in thinking, and you bring yourself back. And then over time, the speed at which you catch yourself in thinking becomes faster and faster and faster, where it might be 10 seconds, and now it's like 1 second. I catch myself going off into thinking, and I immediately notice it and bring myself back to the here and now. Not that you've really gone anywhere, but um, if you're engaged in thinking, it's a subtle way of avoiding whatever's happening right now.
mhm. Okay, so here's my favorite question. So I spend 30 minutes meditating in the morning, and then I go and live my day with all of the crazy chaos and the to-do lists and having to interact with people and all that. So how do I take that meditation practice and then apply it to the everyday life?
That's a really good question too. So there's two answers there. There's one, if you feel like you have to find something to do to be mindful in, you can be mindful while brushing your teeth. Everybody loves to think about what they're going to do next or what they got to do for the day while they're brushing their teeth. At least that's my
Yeah.
experience. So you can just focus on brushing your teeth and notice the thoughts about the things to do and return to the sensation of what the water feels like or what the toothpaste smells like or what the feeling is like on my teeth, and just stay in the experience of seeing, hearing, smelling, tasting, touching. Those are all ways that you can bring yourself to the now of your experience.
Mhm.
If you're doing dishes, you can focus on what it feels like to have the cloth in your hand. Is the water warm or cold? Does it have a smell to it? And can I just focus on that? And you catch your mind thinking about whatever, and you say, ah, and then you bring yourself back to just focusing on the temperature of the water and how it feels on your hand. So you can do some things like that.
Yeah. Well, I'm bringing this up for a very specific reason because, again, all of the work that I do and moving into this fifth dimensional energy, it's all about going inward. It's all about coming into the heart and being me as a complete spiritual being
Mhm.
and being able to live and exist in that form. And they always, what I'm always told, it's most like the Buddha state,
Mhm.
being able to go inward and be present. And they talk a lot about being present and being in the moment, being aware of what's going on, which is mindfulness.
Yeah.
It's exactly what you're saying, and being able to be right here right now is being in the truest form of who we're meant to be, and that's what we're moving into. So you're kind of giving a prelude, I guess is that what it's called, to what we're moving into, and recognizing that as we're talking about this, and as we can start developing these little habits of just the second,
Mhm.
again, just really focus on brushing your teeth, drinking a cup of coffee, just stand there for just a second and savor the taste of the coffee without running around room to room, carrying your coffee and drinking it as you go.
Mhm.
Being in the very specific place of being able to take a deep breath and observing the blue sky.
Yes.
Something that's so simple, but gosh, just think about if we had 3 hours in a day, and in the 3 hours, if we could just take just like 1 minute breaks
Mhm.
every 30 minutes just to breathe and be present, then it would start to
Yeah.
become a habit of
Yes.
being conscious in our every moment.
Wouldn't that be crazy to
I
be conscious in
know.
your every moment? And then you would be,
Crazy.
you can say that you are the now. You are the now of your
And
experience.
and how crazy would that be? Is that supposed to be a thing? I think I've heard this before. Being in the present moment and being completely aware and conscious of what we're doing right here, right now. And I think it's something I hope that people listen to this and start practicing it, because I am. I'm glad that you actually brought this up because I talk about it so much, and then I don't even find myself really focusing on doing it. But I think as of today, today's the day. So is there anything else that you want to talk about? Any other techniques before we move on to the next question?
Just one last one is, if you find yourself lost in thinking. So I have some people that I work with that have some panic disorder type symptoms or, um, fear of flying or things like that. One thing I always tell them to do when they begin to experience that is to pause and look around and ask yourself, what am I experiencing right now? Is there anything happening right now? And you would have to say, in most cases, no. You would have to admit then that this is all in my mind and I'm making this up, or I'm creating this story about something that's not even here right now. So just to look around at your current experience and ask yourself the question, what am I experiencing right now?
Yeah. It's a good one. That again, that's something that a lot of us have, have these experiences. It can be something as simple as, getting on a highway
Hmm.
and it being afraid to drive, something like that. Don't want to go to a place that has a lot of people, because you might feel uncomfortable with something
And
like
then
that.
you'd have to do more of those things
Yeah.
and then just be present with whatever you're sensing in your body as you're doing it. And you'd have to expose yourself to those things over and over and over. And then, well, that's magic.
It is magic. I love the magic. I love the magic. So, do you have any ideas or suggestions? Because a lot of times, as we're going through all of this stuff, and especially when we're really trying to look at, breaking down these old belief systems and these old constructs that we've created throughout our lifetime, we start to feel a little bit lost. And we find that maybe old relationships are ending, or the old ways of doing things are not the same. You're not interested in what you used to do. You're looking for a little bit more support and community, having a
Mhm.
familiar conversation with somebody. Do you have any ideas or suggestions how to move through these changes to where we can develop community or a support to live every day? I guess is what I'm trying to say. How
Yeah.
do we learn to live with this stuff every day and be able to stand in it?
Well, that's a great question. I mostly tell people if you can go, if you can join, a local meditation group, they're everywhere, or even a local group that even my gym here, they have yoga. You can go and join the group, and they do meditation after yoga, and then you're joining a like-minded community. And so even if you meditate with other people in a group, there's a interesting thing that happens as far as what they've been able to tell with research, and that is that the brainwave activity actually starts to synchronize. Everybody in the group meditating together at once brings a lot of power to actually create change as a collective
Mhm.
group. So all you have to do is really find some groups that you can go to, meditation groups, yoga groups, or if you have friends that you can actually talk to. And as you start to discover things about yourself, be brutally honest with your friends and say, hey, I'm really wanting to get ahead of, I realize I do this thing. And can you let me know if I start to do this thing? Can you just let me know that I'm doing it in the moment as it's happening?
Yeah, that's a good idea. That's a great idea. So, what is the most important thing that you think that people should know about mental health?
Ah, I guess the most important thing that I think people should know is that these diagnoses are not meant to give you something that you can never move beyond. That is not the intention of the diagnosis.
Mm,
It is not a condition that you'll have and that for the rest of your life. The whole purpose of creating diagnosis really is for mental health professionals to communicate using the same language
oh,
and then to also study these things that we're seeing. So, um, the most important thing to know is that, um, yes, just because you get diagnosed with something, no label can ever define you.
mm,
It just means that in that moment in time, that little snapshot in which you answered those questions, however it was that they determined that there's anxiety going on or whatever it
mm,
is that is what is happening right there in that moment.
yeah,
And some of those things can come and go. It doesn't mean that it's something that you have.
mm, yeah,
So don't ever attach the label to yourself as if it's something that you can never move beyond, because that could actually get in the way of you moving beyond it.
yeah. Well, and again, the labels. If it's still it's you're putting yourself in a category or in a box because you're labeling yourself. I am
Right,
this. And
right.
let's break all of those labels. No more labels. Labels are to be thrown away.
And I tell everybody that I work with that I have to put this diagnosis in their chart because it's how we bill for
Yeah.
insurance. The insurance won't even accept anything unless there's a diagnosis in the chart.
Mhm.
And, again, it's to speak the same language. If you go work with somebody else after me, that they could actually see what the diagnosis was, that we have some kind of knowledge about what this person has experienced.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, that's nice to know because I know that people they don't think about that. I mean, it's even just yeah. So I'm not even gonna go, but yeah. So that's great to know because people, I'm bipolar, or I have depression, or I have this or that, and then they put themselves in that category by labeling this is who I am, and when actually not, it's just
Yeah.
a condition of what the circumstances are at that moment. So anyway, um, I
Instead of instead of saying I am bipolar or I have something, even just making subtle shifts in how you speak, and say something like, I'm aware of these symptoms.
mhm,
I'm aware of these thoughts. And then you're not saying that you are that thing.
yeah, yeah, that's significant, and that can be applied to many different things. Yeah, I like that.
Yes.
So Teresa, how can people get a hold of you?
Um, well, they can call my business line if they like. Um, and I also have my website, Dr. Bobo at drteresabobo.com. And my phone number
Yeah, we'll
is,
list it. We'll list.
we'll list it. Website, phone number.
Yeah. So they can go to your website and then get all of the scheduling information and learn more about what you provide on the website.
Yes,
Okay,
sure.
perfect. Yeah.
Absolutely.
Yeah. And I think that it's just really important that people know that you do telehealth as well, and so that it doesn't matter where you are, they can always contact you. So Teresa, I want to thank you for being here with me. I think this was a very insightful conversation, and I hope that it helps people to understand how much these belief systems keep us so confined that if we don't start breaking those down, we can't truly connect to the who we are. I don't know where that came
Mhm.
from. The truth of who we are, in that, and reveal that true spiritual being, as long as we have these things that are covering that up. And so thank you for the resources and thank you for the information. I appreciate it.
Absolutely.
And
Thank you so much for inviting me.
oh gosh, it was great. And so for all of you guys, we'll see you next time. Thanks.